Buying a home in your 20s is absolutely the dumbest decision you could make. Now I know what you're thinking because you've probably been told your entire life that you should buy a home as soon as you possibly can. Because this is typically the general consensus given from society and your parents. But have they been wrong about this the entire time? Well, the good news for you is you're in the right place, because in this video we're going to explore the 5 reasons why you shouldn't buy a home before you're in your 30s. And it's coming at you right after this. What's going on, guys? Alex Dunbar here from the Dunbar Real Estate Group and RE/MAX Treeland Realty, based out of the Surrey Langley areas. And in this video, I'm going to be going over the 5 reasons why you shouldn't buy a home until you're at least 30. If this is your first time to the channel, I make videos on a weekly basis relevant to the BC real estate market, as well as showcasing communities across the Lower Mainland. So if that's something you're interested in seeing more of, I suggest you subscribe to my channel and hit the bell so you're notified whenever I put out a new video. And before I get into it, if you've been struggling to get into the local real estate market because of how challenging it is and how high prices are, hit that like button to let me know. It's become extremely difficult to get into the housing market if you aren't already, especially over these past 2 years. And in general, this has always created a sense of urgency for most in order to get into the housing market sooner rather than later. Because otherwise, people are constantly chasing the market upwards. But times are changing, and that's why in this video, I want to explore whether it makes sense to actually buy as soon as possible, or if you should wait till you're in your 30s. So getting right into it, what I want to be focusing on today is this article titled 5 reasons you should not buy a house until you're at least 30. I'm going to be going over the article thoroughly and letting you know what my thoughts are on the author's opinions. He covers 5 key reasons as to why you shouldn't be purchasing a home before you're 30. And those are: number 1, economic mobility; number 2, a chance to build your savings; number 3, a chance to live your life; number 4, that you should buy as a couple; and number 5, that the government is promising to build more housing. And with that, let's dive into it. I'm going to be sharing my screen here so we can be going over the article line by line. So starting off, the author mentions that a great stage of life for getting into the housing market is 30 and older. Soaring prices have created a fear of missing out on home ownership, which in turn creates a sense of urgency about getting into the real estate market as soon as possible. But waiting until your 30s offers some strong advantages for both your life and finances, and here are 5 of them. So he does make some sort of valid points here. However, we have to really dig deeper, as this is super surface level. But let's get into number 1, economic mobility. And this is essentially just the ability to move around if you get new job opportunities or other things of this nature. So let's go through it line by line. So being open to moving to other cities in your 20s can pay off with job experience that advances your career and pay. I agree with this. However, there's no reason why you can't purchase a property and not move away from where you're currently living. Obviously, there are certain things that go along with that, which we'll get into because he does touch on it later in the article, but you would have the ability to rent that property out. So he does make a pretty good point here. However, again, we have to dig a little deeper into it. Then he goes into, as we progress through the pandemic, don't count on remote working to allow you to live in one city while virtually working for another. This I somewhat agree with. I don't think you can completely tie yourself to being able to work virtually. Again, this is going to depend on your unique situation, what sort of career you're in, and what sort of opportunities there are out there for you. Again, there's more and more opportunity to work remotely these days than before. But of course, you can't just solely rely on this. But again, kind of a poor point there. Next, home ownership roots you to a city emotionally and financially. You're going to want to settle down after you buy, not pick up and move across the country. I don't necessarily agree with this, honestly. Just because you've purchased in a city doesn't mean you're emotionally and financially attached to it. Obviously, there is some financial attachment. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of people obviously purchase in one spot and end up moving to another at a later date. The whole point of getting into the market is to build equity so that you can upsize. And sometimes you have to purchase in a place that isn't necessarily your first choice, whether that's due to affordability or proximity to work. So again, I'm not really on the same page as him here. Sure, you can rent out your home while you're in another city or country, but then you have landlord responsibilities and the risk of high maintenance tenants. And there's the question whether the rent will cover today's mortgage payments plus property taxes and maintenance. Obviously, this is something you can account for before actually purchasing. There's a lot of things you need to take into account here. If you're purchasing and you want to give yourself the flexibility, a key point here would be to make sure that whatever you're buying actually allows rentals. For instance, if it's an attached property, such as a condo or townhome, you're going to want to make sure that they don't have rentals restricted. So that's going to be an important thing. Now, of course, there's always going to be the risk of having high maintenance tenants and landlord responsibilities, but that's the whole point of hiring a property manager. Now, that's a topic for another video, but again, if you're going to be out of town, you're going to need some sort of a property manager anyways. So there's a very, very minor point that I may agree with here, but for the most of it, I honestly not on the same page. Moving on, the housing market is hot enough now that selling a home even after a year or two can deliver a net profit after real estate commissions and fees for legal advice and moving, correct? But markets do stagnate and fall sometimes. Of course, the real estate market moves up and down upwards. Your career advancement in another city could hinge on selling a house that after fees brings in less than you paid a couple of years ago. There is some truth to this if you're planning on selling that property in a short term. Now, the whole premise here is to plan for the long term. Just because you have a job in another city doesn't necessarily mean that you have to sell that property. There's other options here. This is the same thing as trying to buy a property and flip it in a 1 or 2 year time frame. There's always going to be inherent risk. But that shouldn't stop you from purchasing your property. Now, there is other reasons, such as if you're in a job, let's say RCMP, where you're constantly moving. Now, there's more things to consider here, but at the end of the day, you're gonna have pros and cons of every single situation, and it's really gonna come down to your unique situation. Now, moving on to point number 2, a chance to build your savings. So, waiting until your 30s helps you build your home down payment and other aspects of personal wealth. A big mistake of homeownership is to buy a property with minimal financial resources beyond your down payment. A Plan B fund for emergencies is a must. Aim for at least a few $1,000s. Okay, there are some relevant points here, but again, waiting to build your down payment, one of the biggest mistakes I see a lot of people make is trying to save up a 20% down payment rather than purchasing with 5, 10, or 15%. So if your first property is under $1 million, which is gonna be the case for the majority of individuals, it doesn't make sense for most to save up that 20% down payment just to save on mortgage insurance. Again, a topic for another video. But you have to think about the equity and the mortgage paydown, the principal paydown on your mortgage that you're missing out on. These numbers are substantial, especially over a large number of years. So yes, definitely always have a Plan B fund. I always suggest 3 to 6 months. But again, this is all part of your financial planning. I'm not telling you to empty your bank account in order to get into your first property, but trying to save and outpace the market, it's just not a good idea. Moving on, buying at 30 or older also gives you a chance to invest in a tax-free savings account, okay? You might tap into your TFSA for home down payment money, but ideally, there's something left over for a 30-something after buying a home. This money could be the seed for retirement savings. Okay, they actually are about to be coming out with a new TFSA for first-time homebuyers. I'm not going to go over the details here until it's actually announced. So now you actually have the ability to kind of do both. But at the end of the day, you have to think about other things. There is an RRSP program where you can be withdrawing money from here to get some of the tax benefits up front and end up paying it back later on. So there's many ways around this, honestly. This is kind of a poor excuse. Again, just because you could be saving more and investing it, your home is gonna act as an investment as well. So I'm not really on the same page as them here. I don't agree with this for the most part. Again, just a poor argument in my opinion. Moving on, home prices are rising at a much faster rate than people can build down payments, which argues for jumping into housing now, as I previously mentioned. But what we're seeing in real estate now is a special situation brought on by low interest rates and pandemic-driven hunger for living space. Normally, you'd be able to outpace home price appreciation with your savings for a down payment. I have to disagree here, especially in my marketplace of the Fraser Valley. The average appreciation annually is around 7% over the past 40 or 50 years. I've seen several people that either got priced out of the property they wanted to or priced out of the market in general. Don't get me wrong, we are appreciating at a faster rate than is possible to continue with. We're not going to see the same sorts of appreciation as we have over the past 18 months or so, but we're still in an extremely desirable market where people want to be. This is specifically in the lower mainland. So are you going to be able to outpace home price appreciation in other parts of Canada? Potentially. Here, probably not. I wouldn't bet on it. So again, in my opinion, this is a poor argument. Moving on to our next point, we have the ability to live your life, of course, right? So owning a home is like being a parent to a baby, constant demands on your time and your finances. It's hard to get away somewhere exotic for a week when there are costly maintenance matters to attend to at home. Honestly, this just sounds like a lack of maturity. You're gonna have responsibility for several things in your life, especially your largest financial purchase, the largest asset you're gonna own. So this is a very, very poor argument, honestly, in my opinion. Of course, again, there's gonna be demands on your time, your finances, and everything else, but you have to weigh the pros and cons, and the pros are gonna far outweigh the cons here. Next, travel opportunities may open up as you get older and earn more, okay? But there's something great about travel that you do in your younger years when you're more flexible and open-minded. Also, travel in your 40s might be to Disneyland with the kids. Use your 20s to do one great trip that you'd otherwise have to put off indefinitely. There's no reason why you can't do both. I purchased a home in my 20s. I went and traveled to Vietnam. What is the thing that is stopping you from doing this? I also went on a major trip back when I was 19, 20 years old and went to Europe and all these other places, and I was still able to save up enough money to put down a down payment. So you can still do these things and not sacrifice your quality of life. It's the little things that you have to sacrifice, right? It's more so your daily spending, or maybe you have to pick up a second job or a side hustle to make a little bit more money. And that's if you want to achieve certain things, right? There's always gonna be some give with the take. So again, at the end of the day, you don't have to make any major life-altering choices just to purchase a home. You can do both. You're not gonna get the finest, most lavish things and the greatest vacations again, but you can meet somewhere in the middle. As they say, it's all about balance. Moving on to our fourth reason is to buy as a couple. So the cost of home ownership is much more affordable for two people than one. Duh. Buying in your 30s gives you time to meet the right person with whom you want to build a future that includes buying a home. So of course, having two people is better than one. I understand that. What if you meet someone before you're 30? What if you don't plan on meeting someone else? What if you want to purchase with a family member or friend? Now, there are some complexities that come with those other situations. However, how many divorces occur? How much does that impact you if you have to sell in those situations? The divorce rate in Canada, from as far as I know, is somewhere between 40 to 50%. So keep that in mind. It's not a given. And what if you don't find that person by the time you're 30? There's so many moving factors here. What if you were to purchase before you met that other person and then potentially sold and came in together and purchased something larger, or maybe you held on to it and pulled the equity out? There's so many other ways around this. So again, not the greatest point. Of course, again, two people are better than one in terms of buying power, but kind of a poor point here. A trend to watch in housing is people co-buying houses with friends or family members, but owning a house and raising a family in it are highly personal matters. Better to share with your life partner than your friend from yoga class. So as I kind of already touched on, yes, there are people doing this. You have to be very aware of what you're doing and get some legal guidance from a lawyer on what your exit strategy is, and you need to be careful who you're getting into business with. But as I said, there's just as many people getting divorced that can go messy, and you can lose a lot of money in this way as well. So just because you believe that you found your soulmate or whatever that may be, Again, statistics are showing that 40 to 50% of those people are ending up getting divorced and more than likely selling the house anyways. So really, who's winning here? And moving on to our fifth and final point here, which is my favorite one, is that governments are promising to build more houses. So getting into it, a good reason for today's 20-somethings to pause on home buying is the prospect of a better supply of new homes in the year ahead. So we've been promised a certain amount of housing by the government, but let's take a look at their track record. How are they doing with the promises that they make to us, not only in housing, but in all aspects? I think that one kind of speaks for itself. So one of the reasons, not the reason, why real estate prices have increased so much is that there's more demand for houses than supply. This is correct. Governments at all levels recognize this and are promising to reduce impediments to home building. Again, this is what's needed. Awesome. A better supply of houses in the years ahead would address demand and reduce upward pressure on prices. This is correct as well. If there's an overshoot on home building and supply exceeds demand, prices might actually fall. I'm going to say don't hold your breath for an overshoot of supply. It's highly unlikely that this is ever going to happen. We are in a severe shortage, and again, I really don't see this happening. Something you need to keep in mind is that even though the government is promising all this housing, a good amount of it is actually rental buildings. Now, rental buildings don't make prices to purchase a home any better. They will help with rental affordability, but not with the price of homes. So this is something that people aren't taking into account. So there you have it. There are the 5 reasons why you shouldn't be buying a home until you're 30. But just before I finish this video, I want to summarize each of those key points and give you some of my takeaways. So in regards to economic mobility, it really comes down to what your job is and what your unique situation is. If you work in a job that gives you the ability to work remotely, or even in a career that allows you to work remotely, you should definitely take advantage of that. Of course, there's inherent risk that you won't always be able to, but again, you're going to have to judge that based on your situation. At the end of the day, if you can afford to purchase and then rent it out and move elsewhere, if you need to, given a new job opportunity, you should always choose to do that, or at least in most cases. Sitting around and wondering what if isn't going to get you anywhere. At the end of the day, it comes down to time in the market, not trying to time the market. And any extra amount of time in the market is more than likely going to give you some extra equity. In regards to building your savings, you can do both at the same time. You can have a specific account saving for your home and another one specifically for your retirement or something else. Again, the average person isn't typically able to save up a down payment at the same rate as home prices are appreciating. And generally for most, it's not going to make sense to save up a 20% down payment. You may as well just get into the market while you can, because otherwise in most cases you're just going to be chasing it upwards. Additionally, your home's going to act as a forced savings account. Making your monthly payments, paying down some of the principal on the mortgage is going to force you to create that savings. And in general, most people don't have a high enough level of financial literacy or discipline to actually create some other sort of savings plan. So this just simplifies the process and is going to benefit you in the long run. And going back to number 3, a chance to live your life. Of course, you don't want to sacrifice all the enjoyment in your life in the short term. However, you do have to think about your future. Again, just like the last point, you can do both simultaneously. The key here is just finding some sort of middle ground, finding some sort of a balance. No, you shouldn't be going on the most lavish or exquisite vacations at this point in your life, but you also shouldn't not be going on vacations whatsoever. And most of this is just going to come down to having a clear budget. If you're going to go on vacations, put them in your budget. Don't just hope that there's money left over at the end of the year. Keep in mind that a small sacrifice in the short term is going to pay off way bigger in the long run. Because as a younger individual, you have time on your side. And when purchasing real estate or making investments, time is your greatest asset. And point number 4 that you should buy as a couple, wait until you're in a relationship. So first of all, if you have the financial capacity to purchase on your own, why wouldn't you? Just because you're waiting for that right person to come along? Now let's say that right person does come along and you've already settled down, but you're not quite 30. Should you still not buy? Honestly, this just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I understand the premise behind it and the fact that 2 people are going to have more buying power than 1, but again, there's just so many other factors. Also, what if you haven't found that right person by the time you're 30? The key here is really just not tying the time that you purchase your first home to an actual age. It really comes down to your unique situation and your financial readiness. Additionally, the author tries to touch on the fact that co-buying, such as with a parent, a friend, a family member, is always a bad idea. And realistically, if you do your due diligence, speak with a lawyer, get legal advice, it can be extremely safe. There's always inherent risk in everything, but here's an additional fact that you need to keep in mind. The rate of divorces in Canada is somewhere between 40 and 50%. So statistically, does that really put you in a better position than buying with a family or friend? And even if you think you found that perfect someone that you're gonna spend the rest of your life with and this would never happen to you, the numbers don't lie. And lastly, looking back at point number 5, the government promising to build more homes. So in all honesty, this statement is a little bit laughable to me. How often does the government actually follow through with their promises, especially in regards to housing? The article mentions that they may overshoot their target, which would bring prices down, but I wouldn't hold your breath. For several years, they've been behind in new housing starts, so I really don't think this is going to end up being the answer. Additionally, what you have to keep in mind is that a good portion of these housing starts actually go towards rentals, and a building that is rentals only isn't going to help with the affordability of purchasing a home. But that's about going to wrap it up for today, so if you did get any value out of this video, I'll ask that you do one thing for me, and that's to hit that like button so the algorithm will push this video out to more individuals who are trying to wait till they're 30 to buy a home. And if you're interested in seeing more videos just like this one, I suggest you subscribe to my channel and hit the bell so you're notified whenever I put out a new video. Additionally, if you do want to get into the market before you're 30 and you think this article is ridiculous, you can scroll down and hit the first link in the description to book a call with me to discuss your options whenever it's convenient for you. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.